Here he comes. There's the trumpets, there's the drums. Here he comes. Hopalong Cassidy. Here he comes.
But when Senator Cassidy was on my show in May, he told me he believed that every American family, regardless of income, should be able to get quality health care. And I believed he was sincere. Sadly, the bill he unveiled last week with Senator Lindsey Graham indicates that he was not sincere.
What is your response, Senator?
I'm sorry he does not understand. Under Graham-Cassidy Healthcare Johnson, more people will have coverage, and we protect those with pre-existing conditions.
Oh, I get it. I don't understand because I'm a talk show host, right? Well, and then help me out. Which part don't I understand? Is it the part where you cut $243 billion states would be allowed to let insurance companies price you out of coverage for having pre-existing conditions? Maybe I don't understand the part of your bill in which federal funding disappears completely after 2026. Or maybe it was the part where the plans are no longer required to pay for essential health benefits like maternity care. Or could it be, Senator Cassidy, that the problem is that I do understand and you got caught with your GOP-ness out? Is that possible?
From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. The title of our episode, The Hopalong Cassidy Healthcare Act. On the 21st of September 2017, the Republicans are back at their various machinations. They've carved together something called the Cassidy-Graham Bill, otherwise known as the Hopalong Cassidy Healthcare Act. They didn't waste time with calling it the Better Health Care Act, the American Health Care Act, or whatever. They just named it after those two people. Effectively, what it does is block grant Medicaid and Medicare back to the states. Well, here's the problem. And it is a philosophical situation, but it is an economic situation also, and a logistic situation. You'll have 50 different states, many of those states very small states, but with a lot of poor people that will be left with their various insurance commissions that are beholding to the carriers, in other words, the Blue Cross Blue Shields of the world, etc., Affinans, you name it. Nonetheless, and then you'll have the largest states, let's say California, New York, that could go for and use the money and go for single payer. Well, what that does is effectively that part of the market, now that's only one part of the market, would cut the Blue Cross Blue Shields out of the system because they would go with single payer, and many of the largest states would go in that direction. The only ones that are questionable right now, as far as the largest states, would be states, say for instance, like Texas and Florida, but it's very tenuous in Florida. Florida has a lot of older people that are on Medicare down there and on Medicare supplementals. But if they went to single payer, they would save money. Now the other 800-pound gorilla in the corner is pre-existing conditions. States could eliminate that from their plans because it would be up to the states willy-nilly. So effectively we'd go back to a time when in the Commonwealth, Willard Care. But Willard Romney introduced it. It was introduced, and he cooperated with the Democratic legislature in the Commonwealth, and thus came Willard Care. Well, you'd have the Commonwealth of Massachusetts having a single payer, and you'd have Hawaii, who already has universal health insurance there, and several of the progressive states, a lot of the western states there, even perhaps even a state like Utah. And you go to New Mexico and various other states, perhaps even Arizona later in the ballgame. So you can see where this is going. We came in here with the theme song from Hopalong Cassidy. I've always liked Hopalong Cassidy. That shows one where it is, and a little dialogue from Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel's been around a long time. He has a son with special needs. And his argument is that Hopalong Cassidy himself lied to him. What Hopalong Cassidy has done here, he's a senator from Louisiana. He knows better. He's a doctor. He used to be at the charity hospital, but there was not much charity in Hopalong Cassidy, period. The problem is there, when you start talking about a charity hospital, that is not the idea of going. That was something left over from none other than Huey P. Long. They named it that, but Huey P. Built the charity hospital there, and they went about it taking care of people in the state of Louisiana. But that was in the 1930s. It is not today. So that is the plan. This plan was crafted by Graham of South Carolina, Heller, who is going bye-bye, and Plastic Factory Johnson of Wisconsin. Last-ditch effort there. The proposed law would kick about 30 million Americans off of their insurance, period. Cassidy stated that more people would have coverage. Well, that's a lie. Outright a lie. There are more people who would be covered through this bill than the status quo. It would not happen because it would depend upon which state you're in, period. And back to the overcomplication. That is a favorite trick. You complicate some things where most of the people in the Senate have no idea what they're voting for. It's not been scored by the Congressional Budget Office. Thus, it's similar to Hopalong Cassidy. Hopalong Cassidy was a fictional character that rode through the West, but we're not trying to, as they say, reflect upon the good character like Hopalong Cassidy. This Hopalong Cassidy from Louisiana is not the Hopalong Cassidy that went about the West doing good. Period. Nonetheless, it'll start in 2020. I'm working from the Washington Post here, and would reallocate funds. That's one way of saying it. Now devoted to the Affordable Care Act exchanges and the law expanding Medicaid, and give it to the states in the form of block grants. In theory, and that is in theory, greater flexibility to create their own health care systems, although only 2 years to do it. And most of these states have had 70 years and 100 years and haven't done anything. The block grant would grow according to an index lower than the general inflation, and not according to how many people are covered or what diseases. Now that is where the 800-pound elephant comes in. So the total pot would grow more slowly than under current law. And that's when you hear the scoring from the Congressional Budget Office, they move on to current law. Now, all funding would be terminated in 2027, So that's roughly a 10-year period. One of the big problems faced by the previous repeal plans were scorekeeping by the Congressional Budget Office, which assumed how many people were projected to have health coverage under the proposal compared to current law. Tens of millions fewer people were projected to have the coverage. Presumably this is where Mr. Kimmel gets his 30 million figure. But then again, this is sleight of hand here. Period. Previous found to be fact checker to be misleading. Well, fact checker is misleading here. The CBC has a lot of faith in the power of individual mandates, so it negatively scores proposals that eliminate the mandates. Well, not exactly true. What they do is they try to project how many people that are under the mandates on a current law. Has generally estimated that 1 year after the individual and employer mandates are repealed, and now this is very important, 15 to 18 million fewer Americans would have insurance. Now, there could be less and there could be more here, because the problem you have is that Medicaid and also the back to Hillary Clinton's children's medical program are out there and sort of in the air, and they cover younger people, whereas Medicare, we're not talking about directly here, is people 65 and older, disabled, etc. They also would want to tinker with it. It would be next. Now, it has not been scored, and the CBC said they couldn't score it in a week. So Hopalong Cassidy's bill, more people would be covered, even though the federal funding will be reduced significantly in many states under current law, and that's a lie within itself, period. The U.S. spends twice as much as countries in the EU, who all have universal healthcare systems. And this is, when you look at it in terms of global economy, this is a competition, a competitive issue also, because the U.S. has to devote more and more of its budget to health care of its people. Now, when you move that part of it from the federal government to the state government, say, for instance, a state like Louisiana, you give Louisiana, I'm not sure what Louisiana gets now, we'll say $1 billion. Well, the problem there is Louisiana has to very quickly put in place a system to cover this the situation, or maybe they could not. But if they decide, well, we're not going to cover pre-existing conditions on our plan, we're just going to use the money basically for physicals and little things of that nature. So it costs Louisiana less than it would otherwise. So you'll have these shortcut states like Mississippi, Louisiana, and various states like that. People will be willy-nilly. The reason the insurance associations oppose this is very simple. The largest states where it really matters, like New York, California, etc., would opt for single payer. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, as LBJ used to say. Now, for instance, the respected healthcare consultant, Avalere, concludes that California would face a 13% shortfall at $78 billion between 2020 and 2026 under the Hopalong Cassidy Act, compared to current law. But in theory, the state would decide to create a single payer system that would cover everyone, so that certainly would increase coverage. In fact, trade groups, the American Insurance Plans, opposes the bill in part because it would build a bridge to a single payer system. Because what happens when larger states do that, smaller states eventually come around. The law also has incentives for states to focus on U.S. population with income of at 50 to 130% of the federal poverty line. Now, that is at $24,000 for 4 people. A block grant funding would be allocated according to the level of insurance companies in the income range. Some states might then alter benefits rules to skimpy low premium plans for everyone else in the market. No one knows that the plans would meet the CBC's definition. They probably would not. You'd get a lot of plans with very, very high deductibles, and that's where you would be. Now, from the Vice President of Avalere, Caroline Pearson. Overall, we believe that the lower federal funding would reduce coverage nationally, but specific impacts will vary by states, no doubt about that. So in other words, not only that, medical centers would have to adjust their costs. Only 16 states would initially experience an increase in funding on the bill. That's according to Avalere. Analysis overall over time of the per capita cap on Medicaid funding would begin to squeeze, especially in the second decade after passage. So basically what the Republicans are trying to do here is plan ahead when they will no longer be in control of government and the Democratic Party, whomever come back in there. But he added, I think it's a very high bar to argue that federal funding to states would be cut by $160 billion. Other estimates are higher between that. Nobel Prize in economics, whomever pulls that one off. Now, that is silly because part of the problem is that, so back to the Pinocchio test, the claim by Mr. Kimmel of 30 million fewer might be the high end, but again, it might not. The problem here is Hopalong Cassidy's no prominent insurance analyst is willing to venture a guess on the coverage levels, but the consensus is that his funding formula makes his claims all but impossible to achieve. In other words, Hopalong Cassidy is a liar. Let me go back. This is from the Washington Post, where we are doing this. This is a story linked. President Obama, incidentally, has also denounced this particular plan, period. The 47 to 48 Republican, 50 votes are needed to pass this, but it has to be done by the end. Now, Rand Paul, interesting situation here. I wouldn't count much on him because he tends to be, as LBJ would say, wishy-washy. opposes the bill. At least 5 other Republicans are undecided. That's Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Dan Sullivan, I don't know about him, John McCain, and John Moran. Thune said we have a handful of votes. We're a handful of votes short. Well, this is sort of around the thing, but Jimmy Kimmel is at least getting the word out on his late night show, blasting proposal, calling Republican Hopalong Cassidy, as we said before, a liar. This guy Hopalong Cassidy just lied right to me in my face, and the leader of the Senate, old man McConnell, has been non-committal. That was on Tuesday about scheduling a vote, including the intent to bring it to the floor next week. Republicans are using the measure, is sponsoring with, this is Hopalong Cassidy, to roll back Obamacare, a goal they've been trying to reach for a very long time. So they had a slimmed down version, the bigger version. They've come up with all kinds of situations there. Now this Avalere the health consultant hospitals insurers forecast that the bill would slash the federal spending to states by $215 billion through 2026, with 34 states facing cuts. And again, this is just what would happen in California. While Republican states like Texas, who didn't expand it, would be a winner in the situation. They didn't expand that. President Obama warned in a speech in New York, defended the Affordable Care Act. So when I see people trying to undo that hard-won progress for the 50th and 60th time with bills that raise costs or reduce coverage or roll back protections for older Americans and people with pre-existing conditions, it is just simply aggravating. And it's certainly frustrating to have to mobilize every couple of months to keep our leaders from inflicting human suffering on our constituents. So this goes back and forth, but all it matters is 2 or 3 more votes. If they don't get 2 or 3 more votes, they can forget it. Hopalong Cassidy said his proposal would protect people. He's lying. And I'm just looking at this, and what old DJ Trump said he would not sign the bill if it did not include coverage of pre-existing conditions. If it does, great. Well, that's a big situation there. And you also have another group of Democrats that are trying to blame this on Bernie Sanders and his single-payer movement, which is preposterous. But again, this is one of the tricks there. He had a news conference that is on single-payer, and some of those people, I'm not sure where, I need to get that up here. Did the Democrats jump the gun? This is from Politico, single-payer splash. Here, we covered that when Bernie announced that Medicare for all. The pitch fueled their revival. Now, some people would say their revival, the Republican argument, every Democrat single-payer proponent dismissed. It's reminded that Washington, you can never underestimate the power of the president, even if they don't always win. DJ Trump's been trying to win something from Heidi Handicap. Now, she's out in North Dakota. She said, I thought that anyone who believed that you should take your eye off the ball before the 30th wasn't being smart, who does not support a single payer. Now, she doesn't support single payer. She's in North Dakota, and she rode on the plane with Trump, period. And this just tells you the caliber of some people. This Tom Copper, he's from Delaware, acknowledged that maybe the single-payer rollout had been premature, recalling a Methodist minister who once advised him as governor that the main thing is to keep the main thing. Well, no doubt about that. In this case, the main thing is stabilizing the Obamacare, no doubt about that also. Sanders' single-payer plan drew support from no fewer than 5 fellow potential challengers to Trump. Now, so, in other words, they see the handwriting on the wall, period. From the whip, that's Dick Durbin, he's from Illinois, said it remains to be seen whether Democrats shift too quickly to debate single-payer as coverage. Well, part of the problem is that the single-payer plan is a long-term plan. Obamacare is the present plan. And if single-payer were rolled out in the summer, it would have been rolled out in the summer. You always have to think strategically when you roll something out, is it ready to be rolled out? Now, no doubt, the people that are running in 2020 understand that that's where the Democratic Party will be. Excuse me, in terms of focus on single-payer. But 2020 is 3 years away, basically speaking, and you're talking about taking office in 21. So a little bit different kind of a situation here. It's the timing that's the problem. Mrs. One Aide said if it was introduced on October 1st, it would be one thing, but almost perfect timing makes it hard to defend Obamacare. Liberal activist groups to support single-payer, no doubt about that. Saying the timing of the rollout handed Republicans a lot of space to quietly twist the arms on the Cassidy plan. Well, they had been twisting arms and been playing this scheme for a very, very long time. Period. Bernie joined Schumer at a Tuesday rally in support of Obamacare. And this is one of the problems when you push a different plan. That is always the problem. Democrats continue their campaign against Hopalong Cassidy's measure on Tuesday. Well, various people are campaigning against it, but it's always difficult on these quick-coming type bills to move them as quickly as possible. Let me just move quickly here back to Reuters. The Russian Federation has warned the U.S. about targeting fighters in Syria. Warned the U.S. it would target some areas in Syria where U.S. Special Forces and their back flunky militias were operating if its own forces came under fire from them, which is a rational decision. The alliance of Kurds and Arab militias fighting with the U.S.-led coalition, nothing more than puppets, which Moscow has diverted from the battlefield to take this Dar el-Sa, where Russian special forces are helping the Syrian army push out the Islamic forces. They don't need to be there. The ISIL forces there, a big problem there, but nonetheless, the Syrian army, backed by Russian Federation and Syrian warplanes, have captured about 160 miles west of the banks of the Euphrates. Now, this area has been very contentious for a very, very long time, and now that the Defense Ministry said the waters of the Euphrates have risen as soon as the Syrian army began crossing it, it's suggesting this could only have happened if upstream dams held by the U.S.-backed opposition had been opened, no doubt about it. So, again, this is a situation you will have these kinds of things continuously happening. And one other thing on the DJ Trump is going to Alabama. I thought he was going last Tuesday. Anyway, on Friday to campaign for Big Luther. That's Luther Strange Love, President Senator there. He's running against Justice Roy Moore. Justice Moore is ahead in most polling that I have seen. Big Luther is, 6'9"? Well, I suppose he is. He has been backed by $9 million of advertising from Old Man McConnell. I'm supporting a Big Luther because he was so loyal and helpful to me. I don't know what Big Luther ever done for him. But anyway, I guess he'll cast his vote to take away health care in Alabama. Moore's advantage is that he does appeal to the true-believing base in terms of which of the campaigns is going to be more apt at the ground game, I would think, Strange has an advantage on his ground game, by which he can steal some votes. Turnout's expected to be low for the Tuesday runoff, said, and both campaigns have reason to believe they hold an edge. Well, a low turnout situation there favors some. More has a share of controversy, including negative press coverage this week mentioning red and green and apparent reference to American Indians and Asians. Well, in a recent advertising, he questioned Moore's commitment to the Mexican border. Well, that doesn't matter. Roy Moore, wrong on President Trump, wrong on the wall, wrong for Alabama. Well, the two candidates will square up in their own debate. Only debate on a Thursday. We'll cover that on our channels, the debate there. Let's move on and do the sports. An interesting development out of the Players Association is via Yahoo Sports. We don't use them very much, but nonetheless, it's a memo of 4 players sent to NFL Commissioner Goodell. This is from various people there, Torrey Smith of the Eagles and Michael Burnett of the Seahawks. Player activism for racial equality and criminal justice reform, as players whom have been advocating for social justice for social justice for the past year. We appreciate the opportunity to engage with you, the league, the owners, the coaches, the GMs, to make our communities stronger as we share with you the silence following our individual and collective demonstrations around the nation's national anthem to raise awareness to racial inequality and issues surrounding criminal justice reform that have been met with inconsistencies in the press coverage and a perceived lack of support. To recap our decisions, currently there are more than 40 players who have been participating in our player coalition to work on criminal justice reform on various levels. For some, other than others, and below is a summary of what they are doing. Our focus has been to identify and place our efforts on key areas of reform where our influence and support can make a meaningful difference in the community. These include prioritizing criminal justice reform, police community relations, engagement within these 2 areas, including police transparency, accountability, bail reform. Bail reform, very good topic of the criminalization of poverty, and that is a slave-master relationship there, mass incarceration, mandatory minimum sentences, juvenile life parole, and the Clean Slate Act, one of many things there. And this is about it. But anyway, if we get into police relationships, etc. here, let's do the scores. This is from Major League Baseball last night. The Twins were in New York, Yankees 11-3. The Athletics were in the Motor City, Athletics 3-2. The Mets and Marlins in Florida, Mets 9-2. The Rockies and Giants in San Francisco. The Giants shut out the Rockies. The Red Sox were in Camden Yard and shut out the Orioles 9-0. The Dodgers were in Philadelphia. Philadelphia won another game 7-5. The Brewers were in Pittsburgh, Pirates 6-4. Kansas City was in Toronto. 15-5 was the score. Kansas City over Toronto. Royals 18 hits, 1 error, and the Blue Jays 6 hits and 1 error there. You don't win games doing that. The Cardinals in Cincy, 9-2 was the score. Cards over the Reds. The Cubbies in Tampa, Rays 8-1 in that contest. Mr. Lester lost the game. Anyway, the Nationals and Atlanta, in Atlanta, Nationals 7-3. The White Sox and Astros in Houston, Astros 4-3, tight game there. The Diamondbacks and Padres down in San Diego. 13-7 was the final. D-backs over Padres. Cleveland and the Angels out in California. Cleveland 6-5. Cleveland keeps on winning. The Rangers in Seattle 8-6 over the Mariners in Seattle. Let's quickly look at the standings because some other teams have clinched. We'll start with the American League East. I think we usually do that. The Red Sox have now moved on and got a berth to the big show. The Yankees are 3 games back. Cleveland also got one, and Minnesota is 17 back. They're going in the wrong direction. That's the American League Central. The American League West, Houston also there, and the Angels 17 back. In the National League East, the Nationals are there, and the Marlins are 20 games back. In the Central, no big show there. The Cubs are on top. The Brewers are 3.5 games back. The Cards are 5 games back in that. And the Dodgers also have moved up. Let me just make sure. Clinched playoff berth also there. The Dodgers 8.5 back. The D-backs, Arizona Diamondbacks 8.5 back. Some of these have clinched divisions, and some of them are in the playoffs, so they're moving merrily along. So Boston is there now. This will do it for us. We'll see you on the Monday Morning Quarterback on the same channels. And we have our financial program, our macroeconomics program to be more precise. Numbers Man will appear this weekend. Chair Yellen had a news conference. The Fed is holding the rates as are with their dual mandate of full employment and also financial stability. So they're unwinding their treasure chests there, and we'll have the questions around that. We'll have Chair Yellen also, and we'll look at that. We're not certain from an editorial standpoint if we'll do 2 programs or do 1 program, or it'll be just a very, very long program, because we will include her comments and we'll dive into what the Fed is up to and other economic news. And we'll also have an open source report. We'll be looking at what happened with CC Cleaner. That is a very popular program for cleaning things up on the Windows platform. We use it on our one Windows machine that we have, and it does a good job of cleaning up whatever that's left over. Have a good day. Our episode was the Hopalong Cassidy Healthcare Act.